Hello everyone, and welcome to this LGBT plus Maritime Roundtable. We're hosting this as part of London International Shipping Week 2021 with Maritime UK and Diversity in Maritime. My name is Danny McGowan. I'm the international organiser at Nautilus International, which is the trade union and professional association for maritime professionals in the British, Dutch and Swiss shipping industries. I'll encourage you all to connect with me on LinkedIn using my name, Danny McGowan, and you can also find me on Twitter with the handle @Danny_union. This event is being broadcast live. It will also be recorded and used on YouTube and other media in future. It's been set up as a webinar on Zoom, which means only the panelist cameras will be shown, though at any time if the panelists feel the need to do so, they're free to switch off those cameras as well. I will ask our colleague Deborah, who you can see on the screen, to take a photograph. If any of the panelists don't wish to be part of that photograph, then please switch off your cameras now. Deborah, if you can give us Deborah McPherson, if you can give us the thumbs up when you're taking that photo, give us some warning, please. We'd be very grateful, so we can all put our best smiles on.
Okay, let me just try and figure out why I can't see this very wide. Okay. Right, everyone who wants to smile? Great, thank you.
All done, Deborah?
Yep, thank you.
Thanks
Oh, hang
much.
on.
Okay, I'll take that as a done. Thank you very much for that, and good morning to everyone. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the event. You should find that on the bottom of your Zoom screens, and I'll encourage you to use that throughout the event to communicate with us and ask questions of the panelists. My colleague Chrissy here will collate those questions and we'll be able to look at those as we go through the event. However, we do also have the option for you to communicate with us privately if at any time you feel the need to speak to us from a welfare perspective. And you can do that by sending a private message to the Maritime UK welfare account that you'll see on the screen and in the list of participants. I'll ask now Chrissy to say a few words for our programme sponsors and to introduce herself.
Wonderful, thank you, Danny. Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy Clark. I'm the Head of Diversity and Operations at Maritime UK and Secretary to the Maritime Skills Commission. We're delighted to have you all virtually and in the room today for the first of our Diversity in Maritime Roundtables for London International Shipping Week. We're very, very grateful to Aberdeen Harbour Board and to Stella Line for sponsoring Diversity in Maritime, and to you all for being part of this really, really important conversation about how we can ensure maritime is welcoming for our LGBT plus community. All right, let's get going.
Lovely, thank you very much. And again, I'll say thank you to everyone for taking part, and thank you for giving up your time for this event. It's the first in a series of Maritime UK and Diversity in Maritime events taking place in this London International Shipping Week. Today is for our Pride in Maritime network, and specifically as a roundtable for employers and other organisations in the industry to see how we can make maritime welcoming for LGBT plus people. When I think back to where we started 18 months ago, there were very few examples of organisations, or very few public examples of organisations taking these steps for LGBT plus people within the maritime industry. There were some notable well-established networks like the Royal Navy Compass Network, which we'll hear more about from Commodore Mel Robinson later on. Thank you to her for joining us. And there are other smaller events taking place and smaller groups that existed. But now what we want to do, and what we've been trying to do over the last 18 months, is to get those networks to talk to each other, the individuals to talk to each other, and through this roundtable exercise that we hope to continue in future events too, to get the employers and other organisations sharing best practice on how we can keep maritime welcoming to LGBT plus people as well. As I said, I work for Northwest International. I've said enough about myself. I just ask our colleagues at the table here on board HQS Wellington, and thank you to those from HQS Wellington for allowing us to use the facilities. But I'll ask those on board to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask each of the panelists to do so one by one as well. As Daisy, if we can start.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name's Daisy Rayner. I am the Claims Syndicate Manager for the Europe and African Division at the Ship Owners Club, which is one of the 13 clubs that makes up the international group of P&I clubs. Prior to working there, I worked in private practice for one of the big international shipping firms. So my background is definitely centred in the professional services side of the maritime industry.
Thanks, Daisy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Les Chapman. I'm the Master of the Honourable Company of Master Mariners. Welcome, everyone. Welcome on board. My background is born and brought up in Canada, 10 years Canadian Navy, 14 years Royal Navy, all in submarines, and the last 24 years supporting the Merchant Navy in industry. And I'd just like to say that the Merchant Navy has always been welcoming to diversity forever and a day. But we'll hear more about that later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacqueline Smith. I'm from the International Transport Worker Federation. I'm the Maritime coordinator there. My background, I was 8 years as president of the Norwegian Seafarers Union. So even though my name sounds very English, it's actually I'm Norwegian. So I've been in the ITF since October in 2014. So it'll be 7 years coming on to. And I'll very much support diversity within maritime and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Kyle, if we can ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl James. I am the Education and Outreach Manager for the Honourable Company of Master Mariners. Unfortunately, I'm not on board this morning, which is slightly strange looking into HQS Wellington from home. But hopefully I'll be on board for the rest of the week. So in my main reason for being on the panel today in terms of my role within the Honourable Company is I manage the Honourable Company's well-established mentoring scheme, which support now well over 300 cadets within the maritime industry through their cadetship and through when they qualified up until they're Master Mariners.
Thanks very much, Kyle. Alex, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexander Rosker. I work for Associated British Ports. So we have 21 ports around the UK. I work in the finance function for ABP, but I also have a role on the LGBTQ+ network, which we created about a year ago now.
Thanks, Alex. And Deborah. Deborah, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Deborah McPherson, Web Editor at Nautilus International and also very much an ally of diversity work. And I'm here to cover the event, as you've heard.
Thanks, Deborah. Katie?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Katie Lukaides. I'm the Safeguarding and Equality Manager for the Royal Yachting Association. It's part of my position to make sure that boating and sailing is as inclusive as it can be. And we are kind of at the start of our journey, really, on hoping to try and create an LGBTQ+ network.
Thanks, Katie. And Commodore Mel Robinson.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Commodore Mel Robinson representing the Royal Navy. I'm also the Commander of the Maritime Reserves, so we'll advocate on the behalf of 4,000 reservists within our organisation, and I work very closely with the Compass Network. I'm a straight ally for our Compass Network in the Navy, and clearly somebody that's comfortable and happy to sit in this forum and share some good ideas, best practice, so that we can represent our organisations, all people in our organisations, as fairly and appropriately as we possibly can.
Thanks, Mel. Emilios.
Hi everyone, I'm Emilios. I work for Lloyd's Register. I'm part of the group strategy and M&A team there. I used to be a consultant prior to that. And I, besides my day role in corporate strategy and M&A, I actually support the wider diversity and inclusion initiative we have at Lloyd's Register. We recently launched quite a few networks around this, and I'm also a straight ally supporting the creation and leading as an ally the LGBTQ plus network at Lloyd's Register. So glad to be here and great to meet you all, and looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Emilios. Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Lone. I'm a Second Officer Comms in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and I'm currently on secondment to Maritime UK. Shortly, I'll be returning to the RFA, where I'll become the focal point for LGBT issues.
Thanks, Paul. Sue?
Hi everyone, I'm Sue Topolowski and I have two hats. I am the lead for the Women's Task Force, so I sit alongside yourselves in one of the groups, and I'm also the co-chair of the Diversity and Maritime group, main grouping. And it's great to be with all you this morning, and thank you for being our first event for London International Shipping Week. I wish you all very well. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to shoot off in a minute because, as you can see by my background, I'm just about to launch the Worcester events going on for this week as well. But I wanted just to say a quick hello, and I support you, and I'm an ally, and I'm here to be used as much as you like. So have a great time, everybody. Sorry I can't be with you for the whole session.
Thanks very much, Sue. Best of wishes for your Worcester event and other events taking place this week. Thank you. Deborah Lade, are you present on the call? And feel free to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, I'm Deborah Lade from the Seafarers Charity. I'm very much an ally. We believe that anyone who works at sea should be supported, and anyone who's worked at sea. Very interestingly, we've supported a small grant to Safer Waves, which is about violence and harassment at sea. And we also support Befrienders, who are the membership body for Samaritans internationally. And they tell us that most of the calls they have to the helpline, and they had 35,000 hits on their website on the first day that their Seafarers Specialist helpline was launched, are to do with sexual issues, sexual preference issues, and concerns about sexuality. And so we are really keen to do what we can to support. Interestingly, we've never ever had a grant application for a a Pride event, and so that might be something that we could look at in the future in terms of supporting you in that way. So sorry, I've probably spoken too long, but just want to say absolutely an ally, and I'm really pleased to be here with you today.
Thanks very much, Deborah, and you absolutely haven't spoken for too long, and I will encourage everyone present here in the room and on the Zoom call to please speak as much as you can. It's only by speaking and openly in the way that we can in these kind of events that we will improve things for people in the industry, and to make sure that it's known as one that is welcoming to everyone, as you said, Deborah, so thank you for that. Gary Holdforth, if you're present, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Gary Holdforth. I'm the Head of HR Operations at the Port of London Authority. So from a HR hat on, I very much have an interest in inclusion and diversity and improving the industry in general. Also been leading on our own Encompass programme, which was unfortunately very rudely interrupted by the pandemic, but we're kicking it back into action now. So.
Excellent, thank you very much, Gary. And last but not least, Donna.
Hello, I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I am the new Quality Diversity Inclusion Lead at the Natural Environment Research Council. And so NERC has overview of the Region Antarctic Survey, which of course has our expedition vessels that heads south and across our oceans. So we've had a diversity in polar science initiative in the last 2 years, and in addition we had the inaugural Pride in Polar Day which we lined up with the LGBTQ STEM Day, 18th of November last year, and we're working on increasing our openness and our discussion regarding our sexuality for our expeditioners, our crew, and for our science team.
Great, thank you very much, Donna, and thank you again to everyone for taking the time to introduce yourselves. It really is valuable for us to be able to do that for each other, but also for those of us that are watching us on the broadcast as well. So again, thank you. So looking at where we've come from in the last 18 months in the Pride in Maritime network, we set up some aims very early on within our network that we decided within the group to do this. And there are 4 aims. The first one is to help identify barriers to change across the LGBT plus maritime community, and where Maritime UK's and Diversity in Maritime working groups should be focusing their efforts. The second, to ensure that the network considers the whole of the maritime sector, all the sectors that Maritime UK represents, which is shipping, ports, professional services, engineering and science, and leisure marine. The third, to educate and enable individuals and companies to embrace, empower and support the LGBT plus community. And the fourth, to share resources, good practice policies and toolkits that support the LGBT plus community across the sector. So what we'd like to do now is just to ask for volunteers, those of you in the room can wave at me, raise your hands, or I'll start calling people out if I don't get any volunteers as well. Volunteers on both sides of the Zoom camera to talk about how you think Maritime does welcome LGBT plus people, and how we can make sure that LGBT plus people feel able to apply for the roles that we are advertising in our industry, and feel that they can take part in our activities better than they might do so at the moment. Is there anyone that has any immediate views on that, or anyone that has some thoughts that they want to share with us first of all?
I don't mind saying something to begin with. I think, well, I've been in the industry for 11 years now, and I think where we're at the moment, there are lots of things I'm seeing more than I did when I first joined that certainly celebrate the LGBT plus community, and a lot of educational things around it, which is fantastic, because it just wasn't something that was talked about or anybody that was particularly visible when I first joined. So I think that side of it has been a massive improvement. I won't get straight into like what I think could be done to improve upon that, but as a starting point, I think there has been positive change. I think there is a long way to go still, but it's nice that it's finally on the agenda at last, I think is the most important thing.
Thanks very much, Daisy. What I'll do, managing sort of both these sides here, if Chrissy nudges me at any time, because somebody on the screen has raised their hands to speak. But Les, when you spoke to us in your introduction, you spoke about maritime being a diverse industry. Have you seen changes in the industry?
Well, if you consider that the Honourable Company was for years was a bunch of grumpy old sea masters that didn't really warm to anything, you'll find quite different now. We have our first transgender member who sits on one of our committees. We have a number of LGBTQ plus people that have applied to join. I don't know. I don't know whether it was the fact that COVID highlighted the need for the merchant navy and to put food on the shelves. But of all the livery, of the 110 livery companies in the city of London, we have a waiting list of people to join of 150 people, where the other livery companies have 10 to 20 max. They think they're doing really good with 20 people a year. So we've got 150, and whether it's because our clerk is the youngest clerk in 500 years at 31, or we had a social media campaign, and and have young people like Kyle on board that reach out to our mentees and mentors and people looking for a future in the maritime industries. I think there has been an appreciative change. Obviously, when I was in the service, it was illegal, but you know, government has changed that, and I think we're very inclusive today. I don't see any problems, certainly with our cadets at sea. I don't think there's any. Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the movement is there. I understand that. And it's just a difficult line between a political movement and supporting the movement. Where we as a livery company are unable to support a political movement, but you know, very happy to fly the pride flag at the mast, just like we do Conway or any other shipping company that have a due on board. And we couldn't actually campaign as a political movement. That's all.
Thank you, Liz. And I guess if I can come back on some of that from the political side, what we're doing in Maritime UK focuses very closely with the, or links very closely with the Maritime 2050 strategy, which was introduced by the current government on improvements for the industry and to establish and to, not establish, but to perhaps regain some of Britain's reputation as a maritime nation. What we're doing within Maritime UK is not political whatsoever, and we work with the government that is in place now, and we're thankful that they're very supportive to what we're doing, and will be supporting some of our other networks during the week. But what we focus on within Maritime UK, within Pride in Maritime, and other diversity in maritime structures is the support for individuals, support for communities, and making sure that people are welcome in what we're doing. Some people in the past will not have felt welcome in our industry. Certainly when I joined the maritime industry, coming up to 7 years ago, I looked for other people like me in the industry. And I couldn't see anyone. There was no visibility, not very overt visibility. I was looking for networks. As a gay man, I thought, is this industry one in which I can be myself? Is this industry one in which I can talk about boyfriends, partners, husbands, and so on? Or is it one where I need to go back to my teenage years, my childhood, and hide myself and mask who I am because I might be unsafe, because I might feel some sort of, not necessarily discrimination, but just some sort of anti-gay feelings, and any of those kind of things. But then what we've done within Nautilus over the last 7 years is to welcome people speaking about LGBT plus matters. So, as I say, 7 years ago, we started to welcome, or we started to talk about diversity within our Young Maritime Professionals Network, which is there for people aged 35 and under. And we just had diversity as a topic. We thought, let's see what people want to talk about here. Let's see if this can be opened up a little bit wider. And further, as we move further into that discussion, into that conversation, we saw more and more LGBT plus people coming into that network, seeing it as a safe space to be able to talk about the issues that they were facing at sea. Issues probably similar to mine is, can I be myself? Can I talk about my home life openly, in the same way that people in heterosexual relationships feel that they can do so, or heterosexual people feel they can do. And then as we've moved on within Nautilus, we've seen activities taking place, such as attending Pride in London, where our first Pride event, we had 10 to 15 people joining us, up until our last or most recent Pride event in 2019, where we had 50 people in our cohort taking part in what we were doing. And just seeing the change within the industry, the change in mindsets, even from the attitudes that we faced within Nautilus in our first Pride event in 2016, the attitudes of the industry towards us in our activities, and then seeing the fact that we're now being welcomed on board by the master of the company on HQS Wellington, and having representatives from so many different organisations in our industry is a massive change that I've seen in that 7 years, and I thank every one of you at the table, every one of you on the Zoom network, on the Zoom call, for helping to make that change. And it's not a complete process. There'll be things that we need to do in future, and hopefully by having this roundtable discussion, we'll be able to look at different steps we can take, either together as a group, or if there's any best practice that we can share, other ways that we can look at making sure that LGBT plus people can be their authentic selves in their work lives in the maritime industry, both at sea and ashore. That's what we want to do here. So thank you, Liz. I've probably gone on a little bit too long there as well. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about how they've seen the industry change perhaps in the last 10, 15, 20 years? I don't know if I could bring in maybe Commodore Robinson with relation to the Compass network. What challenges did you face when the organisation was setting that up, and how have you seen that change in that period?
Yeah, so I speak with some knowledge around this. I joined the Navy in 1993. Women had just gone to sea, so a lot of my sort of motivation and appetite for getting after diversity comes from a gender base rather than an LGBTQ basis. However, as I stepped through my career, it became very apparent to me that whilst we've been dealing with making our working environment more inclusive to women for nearly 30 years now, our approach to LGBTQ was slightly delayed. As Les has already said, we were an organisation that legally didn't permit these wonderful people to our organisation, and that changed 20 years ago. So culturally, the way in which we're dealing with LGBTQ is slightly behind gender. However, we established forums as far back as 2004, and the Compass Network established itself in 2015. And I have seen our ability to talk and address issues in this area becoming much more deliberate, honest, transparent through the utility of the network than it was previously. The challenges we're seeing in the network currently, and the direction of travel that I see, we're struggling to baseline the extent of the LGBTQ community. So we have administrative systems that allow people to make a declaration on their gender and preferences and orientations, and there's only a 20% uptake on qualifying your position in that regard within JPA. So I think we have to do a bit more work to understand the baseline. We're really leaning into the Allies scheme at the moment, so that as much as the Compass Network has been very effective in identifying issues historically, I think it's now time for the organisation to own these issues more broadly. And that's where I step into my relationship with Compass as a straight ally. And we're just working with the British Army to understand how we can train our allies effectively, so that we all understand what that means, and so that we can all advocate on the network's behalf, rather than simply allowing a particular group with particular preferences to force some of those issues through. we're tackling inclusive language through a programme across defence. So I think that we've used project management approaches to get after some of those issues that we have around language. And where I think the network has its greatest influence currently is that it is seen as the go-to place for policy advice on any issues relating to any of the groups that sit within the LGBTQ umbrella. And there is a very close relationship emerging between the network and the D&I policy advisors so that we can get appropriate policy into place to support our underrepresented communities in the most effective way. So by way of summary, I have seen a forum mature into a formal network. I have seen a network start to set more strategic aims, and its ability to look forwards is then driving it to be very deliberate in its ally scheme, very programmatic in its approach to inclusivity in language, but most importantly, it's definitely positioned itself as a body of experts that can help the organisation understand how it can change its policy to support our underrepresented groups. And for me, that gives our work a longevity and a very clear intent in terms of how seriously we are taking our approach to making our organisation more inclusive than it ever has been. Is that useful?
It was absolutely useful, Mel. Thank you very much. I'm sort of blown away by all of that. Really appreciate your input. Hopefully one day Pride in Maritime will be able to emulate what you're doing with the Compass Network in the Royal Navy and Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and hopefully we can emulate that within the merchant fleet as well. And we really want to continue working with you and using the expertise and building the relationships that we have between both merchant and Royal Navy and Royal Fleet Auxiliary, because it's a really useful one, and the example that you've set is an amazing one. So thank you very much for highlighting all of that. Really appreciate it. I'll ask the panelists now to consider how they might think that Maritime could be made more welcoming for LGBT plus people. But while the panelists are considering that, we've had some questions and answers that have come into us, which I'll ask Chrissy to introduce, please.
Okay, so the joys of hybrid. You can't hide. Right, so the first one. On the topic of visibility, how do we ensure that LGBT plus voices are elevated within our industry, and those who want to have the opportunity to speak out can do so freely? Would anybody like to come in the room or online to answer that?
I came ashore from submarine service in '97, and I was in the port of Southampton. And it was not my first experience of employing or having on my staff LGBT people. And I didn't think there was ever a problem ashore. Now, I've not been to sea in 23, 24 years, and I'm not aware of there being a problem at sea, but you may tell me differently. But certainly ashore, I've done a number of industries ashore, from Associated British Ports to running an international accident investigation company to many other maritime industries in London and overseas. And I've never, ever found that was a problem with LGBT people. I wouldn't know half the time whether they were or not, and it didn't matter as long as they did their job. So, you know, I've not seen a problem ashore with it. If they feel that they need more of a voice, okay, that's something they can do. But I have not seen a problem working ashore in the maritime industry. Perhaps people who have been at sea recently can bring me up to date.
Thanks, Les. Daisy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I don't think there are that many like senior LGBT plus people who are like, I think if the more senior you go in a company or organisation, perhaps it's easier to have that voice because you feel more secure in the environment you're in. I think as someone coming into the industry who's in that position, it's quite hard to find that voice when actually, you know, you might feel quite isolated and you think, oh gosh, if I speak up about this, you know, what might that mean for me? So I think kind of it's interesting hearing about the stuff the Navy are doing about the allyship, because when you look certainly in the industry I am in, the percentage of people who are openly non-straight is actually quite low. And so to find people within that who are willing to speak up and have their voice is quite difficult. You've got a limited pool of people. So I think having the allies, potentially, you know, straight allies, people from other industries who are able to speak up and encourage those younger people coming into the industry to feel in a safe space to do that as well, is something that's really important.
I think we have ministers who are openly gay. We have, it was a bigger problem at ABP to hire a woman as a VTSO than it was to have gay people on the VTS staff, which I had. So, and even here on board, because women, I think, are less than 2% of the merchant navy, it is more difficult to get a woman elected to chair, to warden on board honorable company than it is LBGT. Just a fact. And you know, I sympathize with what Mel said because you know, my late wife was a RENS officer, and when she got pregnant, she had to leave in '92. You know, so the issue, whether you're a 2% minority or, and I have no idea how to guess what LBGT community in the maritime industry is, but I would suspect that in the merchant navy, it's probably between 1% and 2%, which, you know, and we work hard at getting women's voices out there as well as LBGT. Again, I don't see any problem ashore. If there's been problems at sea, then I don't know about those. I have cadets at sea who that's never been an issue. So, don't know.
Thanks, Liz. Jackie,
yeah, just very quickly, I think that in the UK, dealing with internationally, because I deal with about, you know, there's 1.5 million merchant seafarers worldwide in international trade. And that's not including those in national trade. And I think internationally, the UK comes very high up in what you're doing with the LGBT+, and also when it comes to diversity. I don't think that the industry in itself is welcoming, because, and the reason why I'm saying that is because people don't automatically feel comfortable about talking about their personal lives. As Danny was saying, there still is a very emphasis on seafarers with a woman in each port, if you do the international side of it. I think that the visibility piece that you're talking about here, it's the network. You need to keep continuing having these conversations so that it becomes not a big issue to raise an issue. And these networks are really important. The one, well, Mel was talking about, you have a forum that turns into a formalized network that then actually puts strategies in place to be more strategic on what is it you're actually wanting, or how are they actually feeling? Because I just think that it's not something that's been natural to talk about for a variety of reasons. It could be that people just don't want to talk about their family life, but as Danny has told me before, in the beginning when he was traveling internationally and someone would ask him, you know, so are you married? And then automatically thinking he would be married to a woman. And for some, especially in some cultures, they wouldn't feel comfortable about saying, yes, my husband is at home, he works at sea or he works on shore, and not being able to say that. And I think that just automatically thinking that because he's a man, he has a wife, or that because I'm a woman, I have a husband, And to find that voice, you need to start with the forums, the networks, as Mel was saying, and then more strategically what the issues are. And us as straight allies need to also be there so that it feels welcoming, that we don't automatically, that we are conscious of how when we ask questions about people's personal lives just to get to know a chat on the side, that we are mindful that it's not automatically printed in your forehead that I'm LGBT+.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jackie. It's really useful. Mel, if I could ask you to come in on this, please.
So I think I was reflecting on, what can we do? So we had Ruth Hunt come to our People and Training conference a year ago. And that was, I think, a strong demonstration from our seniors that we wanted to get after an issue. I use that word deliberately, an issue as opposed to a problem, and understand how we could do more. So we do nominate senior champions. So we have an admiral that is responsible for taking this work forwards, and I think that then sort of sets the pyramid and the hierarchy to deliver the goods. I'm looking at Ollie's question here. Is the argument being presented here a case of I personally haven't seen a problem there, I'm not sure if there is one? Our experience on gender in defence very recently is that we thought there wasn't a problem, and then we took this to a defence subcommittee, and then clearly realised there absolutely was a problem across defence. And whilst we had been sort of quite self-congratulatory in terms of how far we have come in 30 years with gender, actually there was an underlying culture there in defence that is completely unacceptable, and we're going to have to flush it out. So I think that in LGBTQ issues, I think that there probably are challenges, and we've just got to be really honest with ourselves and ask ourselves what those challenges are. But I will say from the Navy's perspective, there is an appetite to get after it, and there is a network that we can go and ask the necessary questions about how we make all of this happen and make all of our people feel as comfortable as we can in the organisation. So it does come back to the network, and it also comes back to the very senior champions that are stood there as very public figures, and us then reaching out to people like Ruth Hunt, I think, demonstrates how willing we are to be scrutinised and find the experts to help us make some progress.
Thanks, Mel. I really appreciate that. And Donna, if I'd ask you to come in, please.
I think I'm just going to keep quoting the commander. So the thing I wrote down as well is about forums to formal networks, and that's the method that we have found success in the last 2 years to raise the visibility across the LGBTQ community. And we've also made sure we're staying very intersectional. Across our workforce, we've got about 30% recording of their characteristics, so it's not that much improved from UK Maritime. But we also had in 2019, for the first time, the head of the British Antarctic Survey said LGBTQ+ out loud. And that sounds like a small thing, but it's actually a massive message that in the staff forum, they acknowledge, they discuss, and they bring that discussion and that community into their discussion. And in addition, we've been working from the bottom up. We are creating projects that are creating success straight away, and then the organisation is able to build on that. It seems more difficult for us at the moment to create policy and push it down, but these small networking projects where we've got social media traction, where we've got Pride in Polar Day, where we had 12 million hits across social media, and building positive stories to then raise the visibility. I also agree with the other comment. We've only got 1 or 2 very senior people who are willing to come out into their community and say that, I'm a successful expeditioner and this is my sexuality. But we've also got that lovely underline of very new people in our industry who are much more open, they're much more able to discuss it. Their Twitter handles talk about their sexuality. We have the pride flag all over our discussions. So there is many levels of the conversation going on. but celebrating Pride Day, celebrating the success of people with their science or with their expedition, and then it's just a byline, you know, that their sexuality is X, Y, and Z. So that's how we're trying to build the visibility, but also with an understanding for our first-time expeditions, we still have some concerns as they head off into month-long expeditions, you know, and we are still providing support for them and providing networks so that people can talk to other people, because we still know that there are concerns in isolated stations and on our vessels. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Donna. Kyle, if you could come in, please.
I think a lot of it comes down to, and what's been said already, is we need to look at the very top in terms of key people within the industry, which I think already with the network is starting to change. But I think a lot of it, and I'm quite new to the network, so apologies if I'm already saying something that's already been done, but I think a lot of it comes to preparing the new people entering the industry to hopefully stand up and help us change the industry as well. So within my role within the Honourable Company, I work a lot with cadets. I was a cadet myself, and very rarely during a cadetship do we talk about these issues, which seems kind of bizarre really when you think that we need to look after the people entering the industry to ensure that they have a long career and potentially be able to change, but also that possibility of using the information that we get from cadets to look at the industry as a whole. And I say that because one of the comments has been made is that a lot of change since one of the people that asked the question has been deceived, which it has, but I think there are definitely still sectors within the industry that are falling far, far behind. And unfortunately, we do still send cadets into them sectors, and potentially, you know, that's a good place to start of preparing new people that are entering the industry to look after the industry moving forward.
Great, thank you very much, Kyle. And before I bring in Emilios, just a reminder, and for those that are watching, please do add additional questions and answers, comments into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And again, if anyone needs to message from a welfare perspective, to use the Maritime UK welfare private message function, and that's available to you throughout the meeting. Emilios, and you had your hand raised, please come into us.
So yeah, I think the combination of these two great questions about visibility and all these questions about personally haven't seen problem, therefore I'm not sure there is one. I think evidence, and probably building back on what other people said here in the call, that, you know, it needs leadership buy-in, and so far, yes, the maritime industry, especially in the UK, and leading example is the Royal Navy, has come a long way around the diversity and inclusion matters, but from a commercial shipping point of view, the leadership is still not diverse, therefore they're not able to see these problems. And this is where we need allyship programs, so we can first educate the people that are already in the industry, but in order the industry to be able to strive in the future, is going back to what Kyle said, we need to, you know, make it welcoming to whoever is entering the industry. Just a last point on from a commercial shipping point of view, and where things might be becoming a bit more difficult is, you know, shipping and maritime is a global business. Therefore, a key question we are trying to tackle is, how do we ensure we protect our people when they're traveling in territories that being an LGBT plus person, it's illegal. So that's something that probably welcome people's views or recommendations, but the visibility can be conflicted with, you know, that point when you're traveling internationally, and how you go about it, especially if you know, a UK employee is traveling to a jurisdiction where LGBT is a crime, or if you're having an office there but still you want to promote diversity and inclusion. That's something that we're facing as a big struggle at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emilios, and that's absolutely something that has been considered as something that we will need to work on, both for the seafaring community, but also for those of us working shoreside and travelling internationally and facing those kind of issues. So thank you for raising that important point. And when we move into later in the agenda on practical steps we can take, then hopefully that could be something we can discuss and broaden out a little bit further. I'll bring in Les here who wishes to speak, and then Alex.
Just a quick point to clarify, because I said I didn't notice a problem ashore, doesn't mean there isn't a problem. In my sphere, there isn't a problem in my sphere. When I left the service, we had a divisional system where you knew everything about the people in your division. When I started working in industry, people were very, very private, regardless whether they were hetero, LGBT, whatever. They were just private people. But, you know, when in the service, your salary is put in the paper every year. In industry, people are very protective about their privacy. And I found that was the biggest shock I had leaving the Navy and going into industry, was the how people really didn't want to discuss their private lives. But that, again, that was 23 years ago. I'm open to whatever, but we have embraced it at the Honourable Company. We've always embraced it in the Merchant Navy, as far as I know. I didn't serve in the Merchant Navy, but when I talked to my advisors who spent 50 years in the Merchant Navy, it's always been there. It's never been a problem. Whether you felt uncomfortable about speaking up about it is a different question completely. But certainly the inclusiveness, I believe, has been there for some time.
Thank you. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, just picking up on points already made, really. I think kind of a fundamental thing to around the question of visibility is being mindful that it's, you know, a two-way conversation, and that, you know, allies are going to play a huge role in helping the LGBTQ plus community. So I think a fundamental thing is getting everybody on the same page in terms of kind of language that's used, getting everybody comfortable with just talking and being, and giving them the tools and language to be able to have kind of productive conversations. And that will actually, if you know as an LGBTQ plus person that the person on the other side of the table from you, whether they're an ally or whatever, is going to kind of understand where you're coming from, then that's going to give you the confidence to speak out, I think, and do so freely, because you're going to know that somebody's got an awareness, at least, and a base level of awareness of kind of what you're talking about. So yeah, it's great to hear about you know, the other organisations focusing on allyship as well.
Thanks very much, Alex. Really, really good points there. Chrissy, we have another question in the Q&A feed, and please, those of you watching live, please do continue to add your questions and comments in there. Chrissy, what's the next question we're looking at, please?
Okay. I worked at sea for a number of years, up to 2008, as an engineer on container ships and tankers. I did a cadetship and was closeted throughout, as I thought the risks of discussing it far outweighed the benefits. It seems today that there are many more LGBT plus people who are opening themselves in the industry, and also major shipping companies, including the one I worked for, being very visibly supportive of LGBT plus employees. It's great to see. Things seem to have changed for the better since I was at sea. That was a lovely statement.
Yes, thank you very much for adding that. It's a really useful point to add. Is there anybody that wants to respond to that comment at all? Alex, is your hand raised now, or is it still up from last time? Still up from last time, okay. Daisy, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but how do you feel about that comment based on what we've heard so far?
It's difficult for me to comment on the at sea aspect because I've never served at sea personally, but I mean it is really encouraging to hear. I can only speak from personal experience that I suppose I also was closeted in the industry I worked in for a long time through fears similar to that person experienced about discrimination, being treated or seen differently. And I can see that I can see why people have those concerns. It's frightening when you've worked especially hard to get where you have, and you think, oh gosh, all that could be undone because of who I am. And it's a really hard kind of thing to battle with. But what I would say is it's only been just under 3 years since I actually came out in the industry I work in. And despite, I think, it having a perception of a very traditional white, straight male kind of industry, I was really pleasantly surprised actually by how supportive the organisation I work in and people around me. Now, I will say that is a very personal experience. I realise other people may have not had such good experiences, but I really hope that as an industry that is something that can become the norm, that people feel safe in a safe space to be able to do that. And I think, as everyone's touched upon in this, I think it's a top-down thing. It's if the leadership and the culture at any organisation is creating a supportive, safe environment where people feel it's okay to bring their most authentic self to work, as you know, the main phrase is, then hopefully that sets a tone that everyone feels okay to do that. But I think also people in those positions shutting down conversations, shall we say, or things that they hear that aren't in conformity with that was the thing that probably damaged me the most in not being able to come out earlier, was me hearing things and no one saying, whoa, hold on a minute, that's not okay. And I think actually sometimes that's quite a hard thing to do in practice. It can be a really awkward situation when you've got perhaps one of your major clients sat opposite you saying things and you think, well, if I come out and say, well, that's not right, is that going to damage our business, you know? And I think it's seeing those things in practice and being practiced on a daily basis. You know, I think the celebration of pride and stuff like that is a wonderful progression in the industry, but I do think it's still kind of a bit of a month of pride focus, and perhaps it isn't then filtered out throughout the year as much as it could be.
Thanks very much, Daisy. Really, really appreciate that. And what you said there about being sat opposite clients, opposite people that you're negotiating with, was exactly what sort of Jackie brought in about the issue I faced in my past, negotiating opposite a ship owner who said, tell me about your wife and kids. I don't have a wife, I don't have kids, I didn't have a husband at the time, he was my partner, and he's now my husband, but that just really threw me off, and I didn't know, should I tell him that I have a long-term partner? Will that really affect it? Should I just go back into the closet and hide like I had to do for parts of my childhood, for parts of my school life, or should I be open? And having had the conversation with Jackie afterwards, and she said to me, knowing me personally, she said you should have just been open, because if they had caused an issue, then I would have had the support of Jackie's organisation, and I know I would have had the support of Nautilus as well. But making that split-second decision when you're on the opposite side of the table to somebody who you don't know what their reaction will be, often for me as a gay man, or for others as LGBT plus people, it's easier just to go back into the cocoon that you've probably built up over your past and through your lived experiences, than to confront an issue, to call it out or to call it in. And I know that our ethnicity in Maritime Network will be talking about calling it out and calling it in, making those kind of challenges effectively. And I think their network is on the Tuesday of this week, tomorrow. So thank you. Paul, if I could bring you in, please.
Hi everyone. Yes, I've been at sea for 37 years now. First 7 years were in the Royal Navy in the bad old days of the 1980s before the ban. I actually had to leave the Royal Navy because of the ban. I didn't like living a lie anymore, so I quit the RM and joined the RFA. Now, I found that a totally different organisation. It's always been welcoming. It's not perfect. It's still not perfect, but they're learning. One of my first things I did once I came out was they used to have a thing called Wives on Board. It wasn't open to same-sex couples at all. So I lodged an official complaint about that, and they changed straight away. They allowed LGBT people on board as partners. So that was a good start. One of the issues presently, obviously, is trans policy and trans best practice. It's good to see companies now starting to look at it, but I think there's a lot of work to do in that area as well, because obviously when you're traveling abroad as seafarers, you can go to some countries that aren't opening and welcome for people LGBT and particular trans people as well. So it has improved greatly, I think, the Merchant Navy. Can't speak for all companies. There are issues with every company, and nobody can claim that there are no issues, but I think the situation has improved for us.
Thanks, Paul. Paul, I hope you're not going to hate me for what I'm about to do, but you're being very modest. You're being very modest with us because you've received a medal recently for some of your work. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I just received the Merchant Navy Medal for assisting with LGBT issues. Obviously, I've done work in the RFA prior to joining Maritime UK. But to be honest, most of the work is down to Chrissy. Chrissy's the one that's led everything here. I've assisted her. I've offered advice when needed, but it was a great honour to receive it.
And congratulations, Paul, on behalf of Maritime UK and Diversity in Maritime, the Pride in Maritime Network, it's well deserved. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm blushing now.
Mel, if you could come in next, please.
I'm just asking myself why this is a particular issue and challenge at sea, and of course it comes down to living in close proximity, particularly for the junior sailors in their mess decks. And I ask myself, do we as an organisation prepare our people well enough to deal with those issues and to talk about them? And my instinct is to say that yes, we do. I think that we blend ethical leadership, because this is a leadership issue, and there is an ethical issue here as well. Do we blend that into our training from the get-go as an organisation? Yes, we do. So we do prepare even our youngest sailors to have the sort of moral courage to have these sort of conversations. And I think that the gateway into the Navy would suggest that we're an organisation that's minded to support people in having those conversations. But I do have a worry bead that, you know, practically, is that a lived experience on the ground? And are we doing enough as an organisation to ask those questions and to challenge leaders within our training establishments, that sort of thing, whether we're as good as we think we are? And I'm not sure that we do challenge into the system and ask questions around this lived experience in as proactively as perhaps we could. So I think I'm making an observation that we are particularly challenged because of our working environments, operating on vessels at sea in close environments. And whilst we can congratulate ourselves as a service that we've done quite a lot, I do think that there is more that we could do about having an open conversation about actually, but what is that lived experience, and encourage people to do that.
Thank you very much, Mel. Deborah, I've just seen you put something in the chat. Do you wish to come in and speak about that comment?
Yeah, I just wondered, I think because seafaring is international, I think that offers a larger, can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah,
yes,
you can. I think, sorry, I've got the chat up and so I can't actually see what I'm looking at. Given the industry is international, I think that offers additional barriers in terms of the work that is happening. because there are different laws, different attitudes in each country. But I wondered if there was anything that Maritime UK could do with their members who work internationally to try and raise awareness and try and give ideas around what steps would need to be taken, and perhaps you know, there may be some quick wins that might start off those organisations who are very you know, not yet started on this route. Sorry, I'm not really making much sense, I think, but yeah, I just feel that if it's difficult in the UK, I think it will be even more difficult in certain countries in the world. Particularly, particularly perhaps the global south and the east. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you again, Deborah, for bringing that in, because it is an important consideration and seems to be becoming part of a theme. There's a question in the Q&A that brings up or references some of that. Chrissy, do you want to focus on that?
Yeah, of course. It's actually two questions. So the first is, how do we ensure that the increased support is not only superficial, but therefore ESG's reasons, but establishes actual supportive and accountable work environments? Should we answer that part first and then go to part two?
If it's going with you, I'll stick on the international side and answer question 2 first of that one. Sorry.
Sorry, number 2, just also throw me. How do we ensure and align, how do we align that support throughout the globality, I can't talk now, of the industry, offering and ensuring acceptance and support to the employees of different nationalities, ethnicity, etc., where acceptance is not as common?
So looking at the second part of that question first, I'll ask Jackie to come in, working for the International Transport Workers Federation. Not expecting, I'm sure Jackie will have a lot of useful information to share, but I'm not expecting you to provide us with all the answers, Jackie.
Yeah, so of course, working internationally is always very challenging because of the different regulations, the different laws, culturally, there are different stages. And in 2018, the ITF had their Congress in Singapore, and actually we passed a resolution about supporting LGBT+. Now, doing that in that region was quite sensitive culturally for many reasons. Plus we have several from Arabic-speaking countries where that could also be extremely sensitive. But I think that this is where we do need to continue to push the boundaries a bit and be able to have those conversations, but being mindful of the cultural context that we're in. So there was someone who asked about sending out colleagues to countries where it's illegal and they could be jailed, or worst case scenario, they could actually receive a death sentence. We have that discussion within the ITF as well, because it is extremely, first and foremost, we wouldn't send our colleagues there today, but there are seafarers who would necessarily need to go there. We have gone out against governments, but being mindful that that's not necessarily going to change it overnight, because it is a cultural sensitivity. But we do have to continue. What you're doing here needs to continue, and then us as a group, as an international organization, needs to use this as a best practice to bring it forward. So I've connected Danny to some of our American affiliates, because of course you would think that within the US they would probably be much more open in some states, not in all states, but just generally they're not very LGBT+ welcoming, and that conversation within Maritime is practically non-existent. So I've connected Danny to them because they want to start the conversation with support of the US government to be able to have that conversation, and taking what you have done here, it's very good to bring that there. And that's just how we have to keep moving it one step at a time, and then linking it together. So at one point, and again, it goes back to what Mel was saying, we could start off with an international forum, and then after a while have a formalized network, international network, where we then could look at strategic aims and goals that we want to achieve going forward. And that could be we target a specific region, sub-region, or even a country, and try to work through that and help those maritime workers in those areas.
Thanks, Jackie.
Didn't really answer probably the question.
No, but you've given us important food for thought in what we're doing, and I really appreciate that, because as we say, within our global industry, we've got we tend to focus a lot on seafarers, but there are those of us working shoreside who have to travel abroad into different areas as well. And I know I've spoken to my employer and to the European Transport Workers Federation about a conference being held in Hungary next year, and how we will sort of address the changing situation in Hungary, changing attitudes in Hungary. And I've had perfectly good responses from ITF, BTF and my employer on how we would look at that and how we would support LGBT plus people in that Congress as well. Jim, you put a comment in the chat. I wonder if you want to come in and speak to that comment with us, or if we address it just ourselves here. Jim, you unmuted for a second, but you've gone back to mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The joys of technology. As Danny's aware, I spent quite a long time at IBM in a previous life. And at IBM, we had the ability in the consulting group to decline an assignment if it was in a territory where the laws would put us at risk. And obviously at Lloyd's Register, we could probably set up a similar situation for our surveyors to be able to decline an assignment if they felt they were personally at risk. But I think the real challenge is, how does a seafarer who has to travel around the world, how does a seafarer turn down an assignment if they're going to be going to a single port on a long journey? So that's a much, much more complicated situation. But I noticed Keir has made a very good point that the airline industry has for years been sending crews into different parts of the world where LGBT people might be at risk. So it might be worth us having a conversation with our counterparts in airlines.
Thanks, Jim. And I know that within the trade union family, within ITF, we'll certainly be looking at the lessons that we can learn, statements and policies we can achieve from the aviation sector, and bringing those into maritime as well, wherever we can. Is there another Q&A question there? Well, we actually have the second, or the first part of the question to address there is how we can ensure that the increased support for LGBT plus people is not just a tick box, the environmental, social and governance section, but really establishes actual supportive and accountable work environments. If anyone wants to come in to answer that question or to add the comments, Emilios, you've raised your hand, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that part of the question raises the other, unveils the other elephant in the room, you know, like the big challenges of maritime, and that shows that generally the industry, especially in the commercial side of shipping, I'll take the Navy outside of it because their R&D, it's in their core, and innovation. So the fact that, you know, in the commercial shipping, the companies are not very diverse. We've seen that as a macro theme in the sector, that maritime sector is lacking in terms of innovation, productivity compared to other industries. Therefore, there's an imminent need for change, and that includes ways of working. Ways of working, of course, includes diversity and inclusion, and therefore it's evidenced by other sectors, such as the technology sector, that, you know, the more diverse and well-established work framework we have about your employees and diversity of employees, increases innovation, it takes the sector forward. So shipping has a big issue here, which is decarbonization and the whole ESG agenda. And that comment shows potentially that a lot of companies probably are not taking that yet very seriously. And therefore, in that whole basket of changes, changing our ways of working, it falls also the wider diversity and inclusion agenda. So to summarize all that, I think there's a wider need for imminent change in our ways of working in the whole industry, especially in commercial shipping, in order to take seriously diversity and inclusion and all the other initiatives that will take the sector forward, make it attractive again for the next generations. But yeah, on the meantime, I think we all, us in the room here, are in a pivotal point that we need to somehow keep educating everyone that's in the sector, but also try to build the foundations for the future and the next generation that can come in and make the sector better, their work ways and inclusive ways of working, which will progress Maritime to the right direction, I guess. That's probably the comment I wanted to share.
Thanks, Emilios. I'll bring in Jackie now.
I was just thinking, because it's always very difficult when first you had corporate social responsibility, and now we have environmental, social, and governance, which is like the in things to do. And a lot of times it's just a lot of words on a piece of paper and that they present to their board, so everyone has this feel good. I think that first and foremost, if a company is serious, they benchmark where they are today. So if you're serious about diversity, the company benchmark is where they are in regard to diversity. LGBT plus could be a bit challenging, as Mel was saying, that there wasn't many that had responded back to try and find where the baseline was. Because if you first benchmarked or found a baseline, then they could see if they were doing things and putting in place policies that actually changed the diversity, that increased the diversity, so that it was much more diversity. And then they could do that year after year to be able to report. So it's not just a tick box, but they're actually reporting back. But then you would have to start with some kind of baseline to be able to benchmark that. But that's what I would think, instead of it just being a tick box exercise, that they actually needed to show that they put in place a policy, and that policy has increased the diversity in their company. Thanks, Danny.
And Daisy, go ahead.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because actually the company I'm in, we're going through that very process at the moment, where there is this huge drive. We've just done our first baseline with a view to do it year on year. And I think it's important that the messaging that goes with that as well, like what is the purpose of gathering this data? Because especially for LGBT plus community, there is like a bit of hesitancy, isn't there, sometimes around, well, do I want to answer this? Like, but what does that mean? And I think if companies are very clear about, we're doing this with an aim of, we need to benchmark to see where we are. We want to then use this to formulate policies and drive things forward and make it a better environment for everyone, then I think you get more buy-in on those type of things. And also, I think it's not just an internal thing. I think it's interesting what we're talking about with the international element. It's also, like, for us, we have a lot of international stakeholders we work with, and it's also getting that messaging out there with them. Like, we have a code of conduct where we say we've got a really strong, like, ED&I statement in that we expect our stakeholders to kind of align with those kind of policies and views as well. I think it's aligning both sides of the business, the internal and the external, where you're going to really see some, hopefully, more dramatic and faster progress on things.
Thanks, Daisy. Paul, you wanted to come in. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's going back to the getting assistance from other industries. My husband actually worked for BA for 28 years, and I've got other friends in the airline industry, and you're not going to get any best practice off any of the airline industry. They've got the same ostrich model as the maritime companies. Head in the sand, ignore it, and let you hide away.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, good to know. Thank you very much. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Just kind of a bit of a question / ask, really, because I'm really pleased to kind of the issue about baselining, kind of where we are now and how to track progress has come up, because that's something we're thinking about at ABP now, how best to do that. So maybe that's something this group going forward to kind of look at in a bit more detail, to kind of share best practice and ways of doing that, because I think that would be a really useful, practical kind of thing that we could kind of workshop together maybe. I mean, I appreciate everyone has their different data available to them in their organisations, but yeah, I think that could be really good.
Thanks, Alex. And it leads us on to a useful point of what are some practical solutions that we can do as a sector. Again, we'll hopefully keep this as an open discussion both here in the physical room and the virtual room as well. What can we do to address some of these issues that we've faced, to address some of the issues that we've spoken about? The baseline, finding a baseline is something that's really important. Something we've discussed in other diversity groups is things like a pledge that companies can sign up to and can support to evidence what they're doing. So if you can have some thoughts about what should we do next. Donna, I see you've raised your hand there.
Yeah, I just wanted to start a conversation for us, and it relates back to the conversation about how you make really tangible changes as well. A key element, of course, is if there are incidents, how do you deal with them, and how does that impact the culture? I think in addition to a lot of advancing on LGBTQ inclusivity, there's also a lot of awareness about mental health as well that has improved across our corporations. And we've started linking our incidents into our risk assessments and into our safety system. And for all of us who go on expeditions, we understand that the safety is key, and linking mental health safety into our safety systems has really given us some traction on some of these conversations. So for us, that's been a really tangible way of making some momentum in making sure that any incident, and particularly bystander reporting, that is dealt with in a much more serious way.
Thanks, Donna. Jackie.
Yeah, when we talk about pledges, I just get a little bit of, oh no, because we had the Neptune Declaration for the seafarers about trying to get them ashore, and that really hasn't helped that much. So a lot of companies and a lot of governments signed on to it and still struggling. So that's just like, not sure. I get that it's a formality thing, and hopefully what could be used is that we could go back to them and say, but you pledged this, you made a pledge and you haven't committed to it. I mean, some governments in some countries and some companies would just say, well, okay. I would actually say go out and because we're talking about it has to start from the top, and there's not many that are champions within our industry, especially maybe from the merchant side. And I think maybe we should go out and we should challenge key maritime figures in the industry who are big figures either in a company or within a classification society, P&I club, and challenge them to become a champion or an ambassador, to be an ally in some way. Either, it could be a straight ally, or they could actually maybe open up and say that they're LGBT plus that we didn't know of, but actually identify some individuals within the industry and challenge them to be a champion for the community for a period of time.
Thanks, Jackie. That's really, really useful thought as well. And I know Maritime UK's and Diversity in Maritime's charter programme does go into a lot of detail where you might start with a pledge, but then there will be other opportunities to evidence changes. Chrissy, I don't know if you wanted to speak just briefly about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we've got 2 pledges. We have the Women in Maritime Pledge and we have the Mental Health in Maritime Pledge. And the pledge is really that, it's a stepping stone. It's about getting leaders to be visible and being accountable for the change by putting their name as a signatory to the pledge. But it is very much acting as a stepping stone. And so then the charter questions the journey a bit more. It asks organisations to put in their baseline data about where they're up to with gender diversity and where they want to get to in 5 or 10 years' time, and also trigger questions around inclusion. It asks about mentoring programs, about policies, and it's absolutely fine if they're not there. but it's really those targets of this is where I want to get to in 5 or 10 years time, and this is how I want to get there. And so then we support them to write an action plan. We've had some organisations actually on this call today who are part of the charter, and it's very much a process. We all stand shoulder to shoulder with you to make sure you can achieve those targets. We celebrate your wins. We provide you with an opportunity to actually talk with other organisations, whether it's in shipping, to talk to ports, to share best practices, to share learnings, and to be transparent. So we very much make sure that any pledge under diversity in maritime is not just a tick box. And as a lot of the task force will hear, I'm very, very committed to we are not a tick box. This is about making sustainable change for a sector, and it's going to be a journey.
Thank you very much, Chrissy. That's great. There's a question and answer, or a question or a comment in the Q&A section, where Ollie said that the Commodore statements have really resonated with them around the topic of baselines. We've talked about what we're doing well and the progress we've made, but how do we evidence that? What's the baseline we're working from? How many staff, colleagues, etc., identify as LGBTQ+? How does it compare to nationwide demographic? And how many of them feel they can be truly open about their sexuality or gender identity? And some other comments in there. Really appreciate, Ollie, you adding those comments. Mel, I don't want to put you on the spot again, I apologise. I don't know if you wanted to talk about sort of how the baselines you've worked from, how you've evidenced the progress that the Royal Navy has made.
So I think this is my own challenge to myself as an advocate back into the network. I'm saying to the network at this stage, if you want me to advocate, what do you want me to advocate for? And how are we going to make that progress? So I don't think that we have honestly got that that baseline, and I think that it is the right time for us to, I mean, gosh, we've almost gone full circle. We started with a forum, we set up a network. It's almost as if we need to go back into a forum to challenge the baseline, identify what the metrics are going to be, so that we can be really challenge ourselves in what we can do now to make things better in 5-10 years time. So I'm on a WhatsApp with the network here, and I've said to them, you know, where do you want to be in 2025, 10 years after you set the Compass network? What are we going to do today that makes a real difference? And I think it's in advocacy and allies. I think we need the baseline to measure the progress. I think there's something about reverse mentoring. So you get all of that information and you get somebody like me, the senior advocate, to go to our senior leaders and really challenge ourselves and saying, are we really doing as much as we possibly can to advocate and make improvements in our organisation for this underrepresented group? And I think we're doing okay, but my instinct is that there's more that we can do. And ever the optimist, I think that as we make things better in the future, I would want to have that baseline in the here and now and say, this is where we were, this is where we want to be, and this is where we're going to go next. So I like the charter. The question is whether the Navy is going to be brave enough to sign the charter and put our money where our mouth is. Do you know what I mean? Because I think, yeah, I'm in an interesting place. I think we're doing really well, but I think there's more that we can do.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, really appreciate that, and hope that the Navy will be able to take part in the charter programme. But if there are other opportunities that we can help with that process, then we'd be always happy to discuss those alongside that. So thank you. The other thing that's important for me to mention is, again, that the charter programme is there for sea and for shore. Companies with a heavy seafaring focus are very welcome and able to participate, in the same way that those organisations with a heavy shoreside focus are welcome to participate. It's there and open to everyone. So looking at the next steps that we can take as a roundtable, as a group of employers, organisations, charities, and so on, the theme that we seem to be getting a lot through the whole discussion is that of visibility, both of LGBT plus people who wish to be visible and to act as spokespeople, but also visibility of allies and advocacy in what we're doing. Are there any other practical solutions that people think we could undertake to assist the people working in our industry, or to assist those who think that they might want to be a senior leader that's visible, or a senior leader that wants to be an advocate for LGBT plus people, but they're not quite sure about the best way to do it. They want to be supportive, but they're not sure how. Is there something that we could do within our group of organisations that could do this? Is there somewhere we can go? Jackie's indicated she wishes to speak.
I'm just wondering if diversity training, because I think if you could provide some training tools for organizations and of companies about diversity training on those specific issues, that would be very helpful. I'm not sure we might actually have that within the ITF ourselves, but I think for at least Maritime UK, given the experiences, that it would be good if there was some kind of training tools that could be shared with others. Thanks, Nanny.
Thanks, Jackie. That's a really good point. If there's any organisations that are taking part that does offer that kind of training, that we might be able to open up to one or two representatives from the other organisations that are taking part within Maritime UK, Diversity in Maritime, then please do consider opening that up, even if it's something we could sit in on, or other representatives can sit in on, and we'd be really pleased to hear if that's a possibility. Gary, you've raised your hand. If you could come in, please. Gary Holdforth, are you there? You've raised your hand.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can indeed.
Just going back on the inclusion and diversity awareness training, that's something that we set up and has been reasonably successful within the organisation. I would say that it can be a case of it's the shoreside staff that are showing more interest than some of the operational staff, but then it's a cultural issue within our organisation. I just wanted to make you aware that the model that we actually use has actually been taken by the British Ports Association. So any organisations that are members can actually get into that training as well. And they're getting it far cheaper than we pay as well. So
thanks very much, Gary. Appreciate that. And Kyle.
I was just going to come in basically and say that, you know, anything like that and any organisations that offer training such as that is definitely something that I'd be interested in and bringing into the Honourable Company. A lot of it within the Honourable Company comes down to education. We have quite a lot of old seafarers that haven't been to sea for a long time. But equally we have, you know, like I said earlier on, we support, you know, over 300 mentees, so who are either cadets or junior officers within the Merchant Navy. So one thing I'm looking to bring in my role is training next year for our mentors, and bringing an element of diversity and inclusion into that would definitely be something I'm considering alongside simple, you know, other things like mental health and, you know, in general, just making sure that as a company, we're preparing our mentors to support mentees in all manners of their career, not just professional.
Thanks very much, Carl. Daisy.
Yeah, we actually have a compulsory ED&I module that everyone in the company has to complete every year, which is a really good starting point. But I think one of the things that I would like to see more of is that, especially at board levels or very senior levels, some specific training there, because it's all quite generalist. And also I've noticed people at that level, certainly in my organisation, are very keen to try and make a difference and do stuff, but maybe are a bit afraid perhaps of making a mistake and asking the wrong thing. And I think there needs to be kind of like a kind of safe environment for those people to ask those questions so that we can kind of get over that hurdle. And I think kind of education around that would be really good. What I would say is I found it really hard to find organisations who are specifically tailored to maritime and insurance, which I'm involved in, that actually offer that. And I think there is a little bit of a gap, certainly for our sector. And I'm taking ideas from this, probably will look at aviation sectors and other industries possibly for that. But there's definitely room in that area, I think, because lots of companies want this training at the moment and it just doesn't seem to be out there, or an exact model at least. I can't find anything for us.
Thanks, Daisy. That's a really good point. And you mentioned the safe space that leaders might want to have to be able to talk about these kind of things, or to be worried, or they might be worried about using the wrong kind of language. And that's exactly what we want this roundtable to be, is where leaders can come to us, can speak to those of us around the table. And if somebody slips up innocently with language, or they might use some outdated language that they've had previously, they might think is correct, or they might, where there's no malice in what they're saying, then that's exactly what we would hope that this roundtable would achieve, and where we would be able to discuss slip-ups, to discuss changes in terminologies, and do that in a friendly environment. And so I hope those organisations taking part in the roundtable today, those people watching in participating, if your organisations want to take part in this roundtable, and again in the network or the Pride in Maritime network of other LGBT plus people, it's exactly that. It's a safe space for the LGBT plus people, but it's also a space in which people can be educated, can understand changes and those kind of things. So really hope that those watching will consider that and continue to take part in future events. But it's a really good point. Thank you.
2 questions.
We've got 2 questions in the Q&A. Chrissy, if you could bring those in, please.
Of course. So one's a comment. I wonder if the Diversity Study Group might have knowledge to provide such consultation and training. Yes, we're actually in touch with them and also with Inclusive Employers. So we'll certainly look, based on the comments from today, at how we can look at that going forward across the programme. I hope that's answered that comment. The other one from Christian. What may be the influence for LGBT plus Q, more specific on partnerships between 2 or more persons from the same gender in today's world, where non-binary, gender neutral is becoming more important every day? It goes beyond lists, such as registrations, where one needs to complete male or female, and there is no option to respond non-binary, gender neutral. Welcome thoughts on that.
I'd be pleased to hear thoughts from the table on these kind of things, these registrations. I know with what we do in Maritime UK, I don't believe we ask for gender to be reported for registrations for these kind of things. I know some organisations have done so historically in parts of their efforts to increase the representation of women in their work and in their activities. How is there anyone on or in the meeting that has sort of experience of updating these kind of forms from male and female only to wider gender neutral or gender non-specific area?
Yeah, we've got a non-binary option, and actually in the baseline survey that we've just completed, that's on there, which I think is important. And there's definitely a move to include pronouns as well in like email sign-offs, which I think is really important, and something that I'm seeing. To be honest, I stole it from my fiance in her industry in accountancy. I was like, I like that, and I'm seeing it slightly more in the maritime sector as well. So just kind of simple things like that, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, certainly the use of pronouns is something that can be quite easily achieved, and can often raise questions as to why have you got these pronouns? What do they mean in your email signature or on your Zoom name? Those kind of things. And there'll be innocent questions. You'll be able to give a helpful answer, and somebody's mind has been opened then to gender neutral, gender non-specific, or whatever in those areas. So that's certainly a quick win for a lot of areas. So thank you, Daisy. Are there any other organisations that have faced this challenge when dealing with gender non-specific, gender neutral categories at all?
I don't think the ITF has done that option in our registration, but we're going to take that on board because we've just got that far thinking about it. But it is important to do and include that in registration.
Thank you. Mel, I saw you unmuted for a moment there.
Yeah, so I think the pronouns piece was interesting, and several of our very senior leaders embraced the inclusion of pronouns in their signature blocks, and I think that was very, very influential in other people in the organisation following suit. No sooner had the senior leaders embraced that, it then put some momentum behind the conversation, and we've then followed that up with the inclusive language programme across defence, which then naturally triggers forums. Teams has been brilliant for bringing people together to have sort of conversations. I think we've made some real progress with this through COVID, and I'm puzzling as to whether we've gone so far as to include it on forms and applications, but I will take that away because I think that we probably haven't done that, and we should.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you to Christian for raising the question and the comment there. It's certainly been a useful consideration as well. So thanks for that. So looking at the time and looking at the fact that everyone has a very busy week ahead of them in London International Shipping Week, what I wanted to do was just to look at some next steps that we'll be taking with Maritime UK, with Pride in Maritime and our other activities, before we make some conclusions from today. Something that we've raised in the inaugural roundtable that we held earlier this year, and something we want to seek the support of the organisations taking part today, is the establishment of a Pride in Maritime Day, which initially we have in the calendar for the 28th of February 2022, as part of LGBT plus History Month, recognising the history of our industry. But also as a way of drawing attention to the activities of the Pride in Maritime Network, and drawing attention to the organisations that are supporting LGBT plus inclusion on a specific day. So we put the initial one in as 28th of February 2022, and we hope that the organisations taking part will support that, and future roundtables will discuss what exactly that might be able to look like on the day itself as well. We've also got on Inclusion Week, or during Inclusion Week on the 28th of September, we'll have a webinar between 12 and 1:30, which is a collaboration between the Mental Health Network and the Pride in Maritime Network. Chrissy, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. The theme for this one is going to be about transitioning. We're going to talk about some positive stories of people that have transitioned, and how their workplace supported them through it. And then we're also going to talk from an employer point of view about how they could support their employees who were going through a transition or considering going through a transition. So that will be coming up during Inclusion Week, and we'll signpost that in a wrap-up email to everyone that has registered for this webinar after.
Thanks, Chrissy. And we have our next network event, which is taking place on the 13th of October between 2 and 4 p.m. And that is likely to be a hybrid event, and some of us based in London will be able to take part. Stay tuned to the Maritime UK newsletters for exactly what that will look like. As you'll all appreciate, it's difficult to plan anything right now, so we'll see how that works out. And then we'll also plan for the next roundtable, similar to this one, but without an audience. This one has the audience for London International Shipping Week. The next roundtable we will hope to hold in late November, early December, so we can look at some of the discussions we've had at this event, and if we've made any progress, if anyone's had any bright ideas, initiatives that they can think of between now and then, we'll be able to continue that discussion as the roundtable. We'll then plan a further Pride of Maritime network event around the middle of January, then in advance of the Pride of Maritime Day on the 28th of February. So that's the next steps. As you know, if you've signed up to the Pride of Maritime and Diversity in Maritime mailing list, then all of those will be well advertised to you in advance of the events. We really encourage you to share them with your workforces, with your members, with those that you work with, your colleagues and friends across the industry, so that they can see this conversation is happening. As Jackie said, we are being watched. People around the world are watching what we're doing. We've got the connection with the United States, we've got the connection, some of the questions coming in from Belgium and from other areas. So we are making progress, we are being watched, we are being used as a beacon for what we can do. So let's take that mantle and appreciate what we're doing, so that we can really sort of change this industry and make sure that LGBT plus people know that they are welcome in what we're doing. Is there anybody that wanted to make any additional comments before I sum up anything that we discussed? Is there anyone with any burning issues that they wanted to add that I might not have brought in throughout the meeting? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll say thank you first of all to everyone again for taking part in this event. When I look back to 18 months ago and when Chrissy joined Maritime UK, and it was her role to push us to where we are now, where we've come, having had a number of network events, our second roundtable as we have here, I'm really proud of what our industry has achieved, of where we've come, what we've done in that 18 months. Previous to that, the work of Nautilus, the work of the Royal Navy in particular that I brought up earlier, and the Compass Network, have been real beacons that will continue to stand out in the work. We'll continue to reference back to them. We really hope, as I said, Mel, really hope that the Royal Navy will continue to work with Maritime UK, and really appreciate the work that you've put in with us in doing that previously. Some of the themes that we've discussed throughout the day, visibility has been a major one. What we're doing now is we probably couldn't be more visible. We've got our roundtable, we've got employers, networks, organisations, charities taking part in this roundtable, recorded, being on YouTube, for people to watch back in future. This is really visible, but what we want to do now is to make sure that our leaders, as Daisy said, our leaders become visible, whether they're allies, whether they are LGBT plus people. We need to look for those people to speak out about what we're doing, and to show LGBT plus people, both here in the UK and further afield, that they are being looked out for. There's a lot going on in the world for LGBT plus people. In different countries, different attitudes are changing towards LGBT plus people. Even here in the UK, we see to have had an uptick in anti-LGBT plus violence just in the last 12 months. And that's being replicated in various parts of the world, as I say. So just for LGBT plus people that have had, some of whom will have had difficult pasts and difficult experiences in their life, just knowing that their employer and their industry is there for them is something that is really important. But it's also important for those that want to come into our industry. the Maritime 2050 strategy is one to build up the UK's maritime industry. And as we develop our industry, we want to make sure that everyone is welcome within it, including LGBT plus people, and making sure that the skills of LGBT plus people are ones that we can benefit from in our industry, in whichever field, whichever sector, whichever part of maritime we're looking at. We want to know that the skills and experience that people can bring will be valued as well. Alongside visibility, then we're also looking at safety and protection of LGBT plus people. Because on the one hand of putting people out there on a pedestal to talk about their issues, they then might need to travel abroad. They might work on a ship that goes worldwide, and they might face issues of safety or worse, as Jackie brought up earlier, places where it's illegal and you may face death penalties for being LGBT plus. One thing that we might be able to achieve quite quickly is with an organisation called the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association, who produce worldwide maps of areas where people's safety differs. It might be something that we can work together as employers and other organisations on our websites, for example, or in output to our members. If we reference those maps, then at least we know that people who do have to travel abroad or who do go abroad as part of their daily work will know that there's a resource they can access. And it might be something that we can develop as an industry together, our own version alongside that as well. And then the last sort of big takeaway that I want to take from this is training, and alongside that discussion. Again, I repeat my call to those organisations that do offer training to their employees or contacts. If there's any way that we can share that training amongst our organisations, then Chrissy and I will be happy to facilitate that and to make sure we can share that best practice. And then the discussion side of it is to make sure that we do talk about this outside of Pride Month. We're doing really well as an industry, in the last 18 months, where the world has been through a major crisis and that's still ongoing. Often you'd expect to see issues and matters of diversity being swept away from dealing with what some might consider as more operational priorities or emergencies. Our industry has done an amazing job to continue talking about diversity throughout this entire pandemic, and to make sure that it's not been something that's fallen away at the first sight of trouble elsewhere. And so again, thank you to all of those organisations taking part today and watching, and for making sure that diversity has remained an important topic throughout the pandemic, and will continue to remain an important topic through these roundtables. Chrissy, did you want to add any final comments?
Sure, always. I can see your hands up being raised by Deborah. Deborah, can I just bring you in before I sum up?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, my question was really just to ask if I could take one more photo, because I was looking at the other ones and they were terrible quality. I'm not sure this will be much better, but after you've summed up, if you could tell anyone who doesn't want to be in the photo, maybe could just turn their camera off and I'll try again. Sorry. Thank you.
I think if you sum up, Chrissy, and then Deborah will take the photo.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I can just see there's one final point that's come into the Q&A, and thank you. Letting us know that we're doing fantastic work. This is very much a collective issue. To reach a broader audience and showcase the importance of this work, have you considered reaching out to the Global Maritime Forum, considering their broad outreach, and to do something with them? Yes, and yes, we would absolutely love to be connecting with them more and more. So absolutely. So thank you very much all everybody for your time today. A huge thank you to Danny for leading the conversation and the network and really getting us up and going. To you all for coming in and having a really, really good conversation. This is so important, and the fact that we've been doing this on a live virtual stage is even more important. So thank you. I'm very grateful to everyone in the physical room and in the virtual room. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our audience as well. As mentioned, we will be sharing this recording. It will be on our website. We want to make sure that this dialogue has not been lost and just continues. And for all people in the virtual audience, please do join the network. We would warmly welcome you with open arms at a future meeting or at a future roundtable. So thank you so, so much to everybody.